Charlotte's harsh words saddened me deeply. We may not get along, but we're family after all. How could she say something so heartless? I felt lost. Thomas grinned and said, "Well, that went as planned. Mission accomplished." At that moment, I had no idea the chaos that was about to unfold. "My name is Violet. I met my husband Thomas at work. I work in the office of a shipping company while Thomas is a truck driver. My first impression was that he's a robust guy, both physically and in personality. He's good at his job and kind to his colleagues. However, he wasn't so adept at the romantic game. Whether it was making a move or proposing, he was like a pitcher who only threw fastballs, no change-ups. But I prefer a straightforward man over a guy who thinks he's a playboy." As our relationship progressed and tensions eased, I found him quite interesting. Above all, he gave me a sense of security that I could rely on him. We got married and were blessed with 2 children. Our son and daughter have moved out and live on their own now. Thomas and I live in a large house. Mom passed away 5 years ago due to illness. Thomas and I still work together at the same shipping company. Thomas has been promoted to a supervisor and now handles dispatching. We had a happy marriage, but one worry was my brother, Jason. That is soft on Jason. Jason has been dreaming of becoming a rock singer since he was a teenager. He's still chasing his dream, pompadour and all, no matter his age. I won't discourage anyone from following their dreams. However, when he runs out of money, he comes to borrow from Dad. Dad, being soft, lends him the money. Dad lending money is fine. But has he ever paid you back, Violet? When you lend money, you should do it with the intention of giving. That means you shouldn't expect it back. Remember that? But Jason thinks he'll somehow make it. He's underestimating life's challenges. Isn't that risky? When I was young, I dreamed of becoming a novelist, Dad said. But Victoria's parents said if I was going to marry her, I needed a stable job. So I gave up my dream and chose to marry. I don't regret getting married, but I do regret giving up my dream. That was the first time I'd ever heard about my dad's younger days. So that's why I want to support Jason's dreams, I said. But it doesn't seem like Jason's putting in much effort. Do you really think he can achieve his dreams while goofing off all day? Thomas asked. Mountain climbing isn't just about conquering the peak. Every step you take along the way, it's part of the story. Well, you sound like a poet. Makes sense, since you wanted to be a novelist. Come on, you're making me blush with such direct praise. I'm not praising you, Thomas chuckled. Initially, I was worried that Jason had some dirt on Dad and was blackmailing him, but it turns out Dad also chases dreams, so he probably understands Jason's desire to escape reality. One day, Jason brought a woman home. Let me introduce you, this is Charlotte. From her name, I expected a dainty woman. She was, well, big. Hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm Violet, the sister. Nice to meet you, Charlotte. Charlotte is 5 years younger than me but much larger in build. Our first impression of her wasn't great. She was curt to both me and Dad, leaving us with the impression that she had poor manners. Eventually, Jason and Charlotte got married, so she became my younger sister-in-law. Neither Jason nor Charlotte held full-time jobs. They were always quitting their part-time jobs in a huff. Charlotte practices jiu-jitsu and has a short temper, often bragging about putting her arrogant bosses or seniors in joint locks. I just hope she never gets arrested for it. Jason brags about stories that aren't really brag-worthy, like headbutting a disrespectful boss. 2 kinds of stories I really can't stand. Bragging about bad behavior in the past and bragging about fights. I think many women also find these kinds of bragging a turnoff. One day, Jason came home to borrow money from Dad again, and I finally spoke up. Jason, you're working, right? Why don't you have any money? I got into an argument with a plant manager just because I forgot to put away a card. Jason replied. I told him it was workplace harassment. He yelled again, so I gave him a flying knee kick to the chair. Charlotte chimed in, seemingly pleased. I decided that if Dad wouldn't say it, I would. Every workplace has people you won't get along with, but even people I initially disliked turned out to be decent later on. I've often been glad I didn't pick a fight. You and I lead different lives. My pride is taller than the One World Trade Center, so yelling at me is practically asking for a flying knee, Jason continued. I couldn't believe my ears when Charlotte cut in. Are you siding with a boss who harasses people? That's not what I'm saying. So you're lecturing me now? You better be ready for this, Jason replied. Ready to take this outside or here's fine too, Charlotte challenged. I was flabbergasted. What is she, a teenager, feeling threatened? I walked away, unable to believe she was actually picking a fight. Jason didn't intervene. Would he have stopped if it were his wife fighting his sister? Getting hurt would be the last straw. I knew I had to watch out for that couple. When I turned 50, Dad got sick and was hospitalized. It wasn't long before we had to say goodbye. People said he lived a long life at 80, but I didn't feel that way. I still wanted to talk about many things with Dad. When Thomas and I were alone, he said, "Violet, actually, Lawrence." "What?" "Never mind. Just tell me later." Before much time had passed since the funeral, Charlotte approached me. "Did Lawrence leave a will?" "A will? Probably not. He was hospitalized so suddenly. And if there's no will, then the inheritance." "You're already talking about inheritance. I guess you're not even sad." "How dare you? Want me to put you in the hospital? Try me." I raised my voice. Charlotte grabbed my arm in anger. I was taken aback but didn't want to apologize. "Should we call the police?" "What are you doing? You made me sound like a monster for bringing up the inheritance, so I thought I'd teach you a life lesson with an arm lock." "You're the one who's wrong, Violet. Enough. Don't yell. What are we going to do about the inheritance?" I was momentarily speechless, but then I glared at Jason. "Aren't you sad that Dad passed away?" I asked. "That's irrelevant. Stop calling me stupid." "I don't want to be called stupid by someone as stupid as you," Jason retorted sharply. "What did you just say?" The atmosphere grew tense until Thomas arrived. "What's going on here?" Thomas asked. "Wife, you better tell your husband to raise the kids right," Jason snapped. Those words crossed the line. "I'll pass that message right along to Jason," I replied, irritated. "Good on you. I'm fed up with you, Violet. This makes my decision easier," Jason declared, dropping a bombshell. "I'm the eldest son. That means the house and Dad's inheritance are all mine." "Are you out of your mind?" I exclaimed. "I'm perfectly sane," Jason said stone-facedly. Just as we were stunned by his audacity, Thomas spoke up. "Violet, let's try to keep a cool head. We're not making any progress." "Fine," I said, frustrated. We sat down at the table to hash it out. "The inheritance is all mine and Charlotte's." "Violet, I want you to give up your claim," Jason insisted. "That's ridiculous. Our dad isn't rich. If we split it between two households, there won't be much left," I argued. "There's only two of Dad's children, me and Jason, so it should be divided between us," Charlotte chimed in. But Jason scowled. "Look, Violet, you and Thomas both have jobs and are doing fine. I'm the one pursuing my dreams, so I'm the one who needs the money." "Why don't you get a job, Jason?" I retorted. "Let me finish. Living in the house means no rent, and with the inheritance, I can take on the world. Dad was cheering for me, you know. The best way to honor him is to play Carnegie Hall." "You can't even pack the local park," Phil interjected. "What if I do, Phil? Carnegie Hall. Will you put your money where your mouth is?" Jason challenged. "What are you talking about?" I seriously considered calling the police. I interjected. "Thomas, what do you say? Can you give in?" Jason turned to my husband. "I cannot," Thomas replied calmly. Jason then asked, "So you're asking Violet to relinquish her claim?" "Yes, and you're okay with that, Jason?" I responded, incredulous. "What are you talking about?" "Of course it's not okay," Jason said. At that point, Charlotte glared at me. "Shut up. You've been yapping like a puppy this whole time. Such words should not be tolerated." I glared back at her, incensed. "Is it cute to yap like a puppy only until you're in your 20s? Stop pretending to be a young girl. It's embarrassing for a 50-year-old hack." "Take that back. I won't tolerate insults," Charlotte snapped. "Thomas, wasn't it you who should have set her straight? What do you useless couple you are?" Jason added fuel to the fire. At this point, I couldn't keep quiet. "If you were as big as a hippo, I'd have slapped you a long time ago." Charlotte looked momentarily dumbfounded, then turned to Jason. "Did your sister just call me a hippo?" "Violet, apologize while you still can," Jason demanded. "I'll apologize when Charlotte does." "Enough, both of you," Thomas intervened. "Violet, calm down." "Fine, let's proceed with the disinheritance," Jason declared. I looked at Thomas with wide eyes, searching for reassurance, but something in his gaze told me he had a plan. Why else would he agree to such an unreasonable demand? I had no choice but to trust Thomas. "So, Jason, just to confirm, you're fine with Violet being disinherited?" Thomas asked calmly. "I've been saying that Stop making me repeat myself. It's annoying, Jason replied irritably. What an infuriating couple. A wife who acts younger than she is and a husband who thinks he's smart but is actually dumb, Charlotte sneered. Leave the money and move out already, Jason demanded. Charlotte's harsh words saddened me. Aren't we still family despite our differences? How could she say such merciless things? Why should we be the ones to leave? I couldn't agree to this. We'll find a new place soon, but we have belongings. Please give us a bit more time, I pleaded. If you take too long, I'll throw everything outside, Charlotte threatened. Try it, and I'll call the police. Think I'll be scared if you mention the police? I'm not afraid. Call the Marines if you want to arrest me, I retorted, unable to contain my anger. I stepped outside, pondering if Dad bore some responsibility. Thomas smiled knowingly at my confusion. It worked. Our plan was a success, he said, reflecting on these moments that made him thankful for our savings. With savings, you don't need to borrow money. Even with zero debt, there are substantial monthly expenses: rent, utilities, food, taxes. Taking on more debt would naturally make things tougher, Thomas explained. I've always made it a point to avoid loans, pay in full for what I buy, and save a bit each month. Years of this effort mean we won't be in a bind when emergencies happen. Maybe Jason set a bad example. He lives impulsively and turns to Dad when he's out of money. It was one thing when Dad was working, but he had no problem borrowing even after Dad retired, I added. I always tell our kids how important it is to save so they don't end up like that. Thomas and I settled into our new condo after finishing unpacking. Thomas broached the topic cautiously. Let's consult a lawyer first, to initiate the renunciation of inheritance. Are we really giving it up? He asked. That's when Thomas finally disclosed what he had almost mentioned before. While playing chess with Lawrence, he quietly mentioned that he lost all his savings and is in debt, Thomas revealed. What? Because of Jason? I gasped, shocked. Yes, that made them even more unforgivable. Maybe that couple also shortened Dad's life, Thomas conjectured. You're not entirely right, but you're close, Thomas continued, surprising me with another revelation. Charlotte had yelled loudly at Dad and pushed him with both hands from behind. It wasn't just a one-time prank. It happened multiple times. Dad started fearing it was an attempt to induce a heart attack and couldn't say anything when Jason came to borrow money. I never thought they'd go that far. In other words, Lawrence had much more debt than assets. Do you get what I'm saying? Yes, now I understand. Inheritors receive not just assets but also debt. If the debt exceeds the assets, you can renounce the inheritance. Let's ask the lawyer. That's the best course. We consulted a lawyer and successfully renounced the inheritance. Just as I suspected, Jason and his wife barged into our new condo. Violet, you set us up, didn't you? Jason accused. Set you up? What are you talking about? I replied, playing dumb. Don't play dumb. There's no inheritance from Dad, just debt. You knew, didn't you? He snapped. I had no idea. This won't end with just an arm lock. Be ready for a chokehold, I threatened, pulling out my mobile phone. Hello, is this the police? I began, but Charlotte grabbed my phone and shut it off. Violet, how are you going to take responsibility for this? She challenged. That's when Thomas stepped in. Jason, I recall asking you multiple times if it's okay to relinquish the inheritance, right? So you knew it was drowning in debt, didn't you? I had no idea, Jason muttered. Whenever Jason needed money, Lawrence would lend it without a second thought. He gave out big amounts like it was nothing. I assumed Lawrence must be well off, I explained. Jason was at a loss for words, but Charlotte interjected. Nice try, but you're not weaseling your way out of this. We inherited those debts. You two need to do something about it. What responsibility are you talking about? My spouse and I are not responsible for any of this, I retorted. Hey, are you going to do something about this or not? Threats won't work on me, Charlotte challenged. Or should we lay it all out for a third party? I'll share every detail of what happened to Jason. Are you okay with that? How would I know that Dad went into debt just to give Jason money? If I knew, I would have stopped it. Do you even realize you shortened Dad's life? Jason finally responded. Unable to respond further, Jason stayed silent, but Charlotte remained defiant. If you're going to say that, are you okay with both of you ending up in the hospital? Enough of this nonsense. If you lay a hand on me or coerce me, it's jail time. I warned Charlotte. Your threats don't work on me. You're 45 and talking like some high school delinquent. Charlotte smirked and glanced back at Thomas. Wait, were those lines aimed at me? Right after saying it, you coerced me. Coercion is a serious crime, you know. You won't get probation, idiot. Are you a judge now? It's complex to decide whether probation applies in any crime. Don't talk nonsense when you know nothing, I fired back. Seeing Charlotte's anger intensify, Thomas turned to Jason. Jason, are you okay with this? Charlotte, just shut up for a second, Jason finally said, clearly feeling the tension rise. Excuse me, who are you telling to shut up? Charlotte snapped back, her menacing glare now palpable with danger. I said, if you want to fight, do it outside. I won't allow it in my house. Let's calm down for now. As Jason stepped out into the hallway, Charlotte followed. I quickly closed the door and locked it. Their arguing voices echoed, but I was more worried about causing a disturbance in the neighborhood. Did you just tell me to shut up? What are you going to do if I call the police? Charlotte threatened. Don't worry, I'll call an ambulance in a minute, I replied calmly. A few seconds later, Jason's screams echoed down the hall. I pretended not to hear him. Shortly after, I heard what sounded like a cry of pain, but I dismissed it. Jason and Charlotte had severed ties with our family with their insults. Whether they divorced or Charlotte got arrested for assault, it was none of my concern. A few days later, I received a call from Jason. Violet, I was wrong. Will you help me? He pleaded. Who is this? I feigned ignorance. Don't be like that. We're siblings, right? He continued, his voice strained. I couldn't help but feel it was too late. It turned out Jason was in the hospital. Apparently, Charlotte had broken his arm. It felt surreal, almost like something out of a comic book. Ever heard the term you reap what you sow? I'm genuinely sorry. Could you cut me some slack? I can't afford the hospital bills, Jason begged. That's unfortunate, I replied coldly. No matter how much he pleaded, I kept my distance. Jason seemed speechless after my harsh words. Switching the call to Thomas, I ended it abruptly. Don't call him by his first name. We're no longer family, I asserted before hanging up. Thomas and I did go to the hospital, but not to visit. It was better to settle it face to face. Jason pleaded politely, please help me. Debt collectors have come to the hospital's first floor. The nurse told me I'm scared to death. Thomas looked stern. After the insults you and your spouse hurled, it's only natural for us to cut ties. That's not what I meant. If we're not cutting ties, then why renounce the inheritance? Jason looked down, his voice softening. I apologize for what I've done, but I need your help. I have no one else to turn to. What about Charlotte? Jason pleaded. We're divorced. A family falling apart, I replied somberly. Then she's at the police station for assault. It felt unreal. You repeatedly called my wife an idiot. If I had called Charlotte that, you'd never forgive me, Jason said, troubled. People who spew hate often don't remember what they've said, but those on the receiving end don't forget. I have a good memory. I remember every word you two have said. I've heard it from Charlotte as well, Thomas interjected calmly. The wife should be properly disciplined by the husband, Jason attempted to justify. What does that even mean? Explain it to me, Thomas pressed on logically. What did Charlotte mean when she said a wife should lay down her body? Is that even something you should say to a woman? Jason seemed to have forgotten not just his own comments but also those made by Charlotte. Yelling like a little puppy, that's a clear insult. As for my dear wife, you called her a young one-ape or a 50-year-old hack. Don't repeat it. Sorry, Jason muttered. Thomas didn't let up. You said it to me as well when I asked repeatedly if I should disclaim my inheritance. You told me to stop making you repeat yourself because it's annoying. It's too late for any excuses now. Jason lowered his head on the hospital bed, looking crestfallen. I'm really sorry. Can you please find it in your heart to forgive me? No way. Charlotte called my wife an old hag, and you insulted me by saying I'm not mentally sharp. By the way, what does not mentally sharp mean? Explain it to me, Thomas demanded, glaring at the trembling Jason. Jason's eyes widened with a terrified look. If I weren't in a hospital, I'd be yelling right now. Let's just cut ties off completely, Thomas declared firmly. You're the one who said to leave the money and move out quickly, I added, supporting Thomas's decision. Thomas looked down at the dejected Jason, then turned to me. Shall we go? Yes, I nodded. After all was said, I thought Thomas might end up offering financial help out of a sense of divine mercy, but he stood his ground. As we left the hospital, a smile crossed my face. I saw your scary side today. There's nothing like that. Be kind to me, okay? Thomas replied with a gentle smile. Of course, I said softly. The storm has passed. From now on, I hope for peaceful days basking in the warmth of spring sunlight.